There has been something happening for the last few years that I call the narrative. It's really hard to give an accurate description of the narrative because it involves a lot of lying and manipulation. You need facts to back up these claims, so many people could just brush off criticism. However, recent history has provided me with a bunch of examples to explain this, so rather than throw out accusations, I'll just let the facts speak for themselves. One of the biggest names in the narrative is Anita Sarkeesian. Anita started a controversial video series called Tropes vs. Women in Video Games, and with that came harassment. A lot of this can be debated, so I'm not going to say much about it. It was building up for several years when it reached its peak at the United Nations, where Anita Sarkeesian and Zoe Quinn spoke. With that came the UN report, which was so bad, even people who normally toe the social justice line had to question it. Even Zoe Quinn, who spoke at the UN, criticized it. One of the biggest criticisms of Anita speaking at the UN was wanting to redefine harassment to encompass people posting videos on YouTube criticizing her. Anita doesn't like people telling her over and over that she sucks or she's a liar. When you spend years promoting videos with lies in them, it's not unjustified for people to spend years calling her a liar. If we ever get to a point where just the act of criticism or disagreement is harassment, that threatens free speech. So let's move on to Zoe Quinn. If I remember all this correctly, Aaron Joni posted the Zoe post, which supposedly led to Zoe getting harassed, which led to a restraining order against Aaron. I guess Aaron was also gagged, meaning he wasn't allowed to discuss Zoe online. I don't necessarily agree with everything Aaron did, nor do I agree with Zoe on everything. Last week, Zoe finally decided to drop the harassment charges. That's not to say everything is over and done with, just that for the most part, Zoe threw in the towel when it comes to that case. There's a lot more to it than that, but I'm not going to get into that in this video. Then there was Stephanie Guthrie. A short version of this story is she went after the person who made a beat-up Anita game. The game had already been taken down when she looked into it, but she found the name of the creator and went after his personal life. Stephanie actually tried to damage him in the real world, even though the creator of the game was not harassing Anita by making that game. Kind of ironic, because what Guthrie did would actually be considered harassment by Anita's definition. This caught the interest of Gregory Allen Elliott, who went after her. I won't say I agree with everything Allen may have said or done, but what happened as a result is he was banned from the internet for several years. It was only recently that he was found not guilty of criminal harassment and allowed to resume access to the internet. So let's take what I've discussed so far. Anita wants to redefine harassment to encompass criticism. With Zoe Quinn, she muzzled someone else from talking about her. With Guthrie, she got someone banned from the internet. It's not just an issue of, are they harassed? It's that they are trying to set a precedent on what constitutes their ability to silence those who disagree with them or say and do things that they don't like. With Anita, I'm not worried about myself at the moment because I don't fit specifically into the criteria Anita was talking about. She said videos on her can send large amounts of people her way and referred to it as a cottage industry. I don't have a large audience and don't make money off this. However, if I don't say anything about Anita's definition of harassment, it won't be long before someone defines what I do as harassment. As it so happens, I've learned her supporters lump me in with all of her other critics. Many of you know what I'm about to say, but for the unaware, I do have a history of criticizing her other critics. I wouldn't say that they necessarily harass Anita, so much as some of it's just bad behavior. But most rational people who disagree with my videos on Anita would not call me a harasser. But as I've learned over the last year and a half, a lot of people who defend Anita and go after her critics aren't very rational. With Zoe Quinn, she silenced someone from talking about her online. I'm sure the people who defend Zoe can make all sorts of justifications for this, but what happens if this becomes a new standard? What if people can start restricting who can discuss who on the internet? A lot of people don't have foresight for what this would eventually lead to should it become a new standard. Now, for the sake of avoiding a debate, let's just assume Zoe Quinn could make a case to justify what she did. Let's set that aside and focus on Stephanie Guthrie. Stephanie did not go after someone who doxed Anita or vandalized her wiki page. She did not go after someone who was actually harassing Anita. She targeted someone who made a stupid game. What does this imply? People have been after Anita for years because of her videos, try to damage her personal life, and that's harassment. But when Goo3 goes after some guy who made a stupid game and seeks to damage his personal life, that is acceptable. Those are some serious double standards, because what Stephanie Goo3 did would be considered harassment if she did it to Anita Sarkeesian. Then Gregory Elliott got involved and was suspended from the internet for years. Think about how things would be if people like Stephanie Goo3, who engages in Anita Sarkeesian's definition of harassment, can get other people banned from the internet. All these stories are examples of grabbing for too much power and control, changing the definition of harassment, setting up an environment that allows people to lie and manipulate without opposing points of view, allowing these social justice types to engage in their definition of harassment while banning others who do the same. And as such, with all these stories, they all lost. The original UN report was pulled down after harsh criticism. Zoe Quinn dropped the harassment charges against Aaron. Stephanie Goo3 lost her case. I'd say a lot of their problem is how they went about trying to deal with things. They think it's a broken system. Well, all I can say is when you try to fix a broken system with lies and manipulation, that is a broken way of fixing things. Speaking of lies, let's just give an example of what it's like trying to call out a liar. One lie I've discussed in the past was when Randy Harper lied about getting swatted. When it first happened, she stated it as a fact. When you say, just got swatted, the first thing that comes to mind is a SWAT team breaking down your door and forcing you to the ground. What we ended up learning was Randy was paid a visit by some police officers. Now, she could have said someone attempted to swat her, but her initial tweet said she was swatted. So let's say, hypothetically speaking, that I had a conversation with her over this, and told her it was wrong to lie, and she should be honest with her audience. Do you think she would own up to it? Do you think if I told anyone who supports her that they'd say anything? This is a textbook example of how these people can lie without repercussions. I can point out any number of lies by Anita, Randy, Zoe, and Brianna that just get overlooked. The narrative is so important that we can't put any cracks in it by acknowledging listen and believe is not the end-all be-all. With the narrative, when people lie and manipulate, it needs to be overlooked for the greater good. Another aspect of the narrative is there are two sides, those for it and those against it. The best example I can give of this is Lee Alexander. As I've previously said, there has been an element of social justice in gaming for years, even before Gamergate. When Gamergate first happened, Lee Alexander published her Gamers Are Over article. She gave these broad generalizations about gaming culture that encompassed a lot of people, including people who were not harassing Zoe Quinn, Anita Sarkeesian, or Brianna Wu. Part of the way through the article, Lee mentioned that maybe it's just a vocal minority that's not representative of most people. This would have been a more accurate description, but that's not the article she wrote. Toward the end, she said there is no debate to be had. What Lee Alexander did was draw a line in the sand. Before that point, things were not as divided in gaming culture as they are now. What happened as a result of this? A year and a half later, she decided to quit video game journalism, and the gamers she declared over are still here. Let's not forget about Brianna Wu. I have so much I could say about her. I'll just go to this example. Like the Game Awards, SXSW only nominated white men for YouTube work. This isn't about diversity, it's about bias. If you look close at this picture, you can see Angry Joe. Angry Joe himself responded to this. Huh? I'm not a white dude. I'm a proud Hispanic. I guess I don't count as diverse anymore. LOL. Brianna ended up apologizing, but why did she say this to begin with? Another part of the narrative is to highlight sexism and racism, or in this case, perceived racism and sexism. In this particular case, Brianna Wu literally saw racism where it does not exist. Now, broadening the discussion to look at the overall picture, I won't say that the other side doesn't have their problems. It's not like they are perfect and never make mistakes. The people who oppose the narrative have had their fair share of losses along the way, but in this video, I am talking about the narrative itself. Now, I could cover any number of people who support the narrative. You know the ones. The people who are so infatuated with some of your ideas that they don't stop to consider whether what you're actually doing is a good idea. The people who love your ideology but can't bring themselves to call you out when you are undeniably lying or manipulating. Over the last half year, the narrative has been crumbling. It's like we're getting to the point where I don't have to say much. You can deny this and explain how everyone else is wrong, but the facts speak for themselves.